Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of This Week in Travel. My name is Gary Arndt, coming to you from my beautiful mom's basement here in Wisconsin. We got a lot of interesting places. Jen, Leo, coming to us from where? Your rec room in Carlsbad, California?
Correct.
Chris Christensen is not with us this week. He is in a better place, and that place is called Belgium, where he's off drinking beer and eating chocolate or doing whatever they do in Belgium. We got a very special guest with us this week, Rolf Potts, who's celebrating the 10th anniversary of the release of his book, Vagabonding. And I think you were on the show once a couple of years ago, right?
Yeah, it was after I did a trip around the world with no luggage. I think it was 2010.
Yeah, I remember that. And that was when we very first started the show. But we're glad to have you back. And this will be one of our rare three-person episodes, but those always tend to be the best. So let's... go ahead.
Oh, it's good to be here, and I apologize for sounding like I'm in a garage because I am. So
we got a garage, a basement, and a rec room.
You're the most civilized, Jen.
Barely.
This is the one we're submitting for a Lowell Thomas Award next year. This is what's going to beat Rick Steves. This is the high production value that people have come to associate with This Week in Travel.
We're the punk rock Rick Steves right here.
Let's go on to our first story this week. There's a lot of cities in the world. They build something that's sort of iconic, and it becomes a big draw for people. And one of the things has been the London Eye. That's kind of become one of the iconic images of London, the big Ferris wheel. Singapore created a giant Ferris wheel, and now Staten Island wants to create a gigantic Ferris wheel. Rolf,
don't forget about Vegas, Gary. Don't forget.
Oh, do they got a Vegas? Do they have one too?
Mm-hmm.
So, Rolf, if they create this giant Ferris wheel, would that still get you to go to Staten Island?
Ooh, man. Ferris wheels, I think this is really, really, like, it's a great hipster move for Staten Island, because what is more steampunk and retro than a Ferris wheel, you know? It's like this low-tech 1870s technology. Man, I don't... Staten Island is sort of the ugly little brother of New York, and coming from a place like Kansas that I do, sort of an underappreciated state. Sure, why not? I'll go and hang out in that Ferris wheel.
Jen, would this draw you?
I haven't even been to Staten Island, and the year that I lived in London, I didn't even go on the London Eye. I get a tiny bit claustrophobic, and so from what I heard, it's really cool for the first 5 minutes, and then you're just stuck in the whole capsule with everybody for the next 30. So I prefer to look at it from a distance as opposed to getting in it.
I don't know if this will work, but one of the neat, interesting things is this came from an article on the Huffington Post. The artist rendition, you actually do get a rather interesting view of the Manhattan skyline from Manhattan, or from Staten Island. Might be more interesting to do this somewhere like Brooklyn, but I don't know. Like, you're right, most people have never been to Staten Island. They go to New York, maybe they go to Manhattan, maybe they go to Brooklyn, but unless they take the ferry, no one's really going to be going there. What's this about Vegas getting a Ferris wheel? I did not hear about this.
Vegas was getting two. I think one, I don't know if it's all the way up yet. I don't think it is, I don't know if it's in action yet. But the second one is on hold, and the first one was going. But they're trying for one on either ends of the strip.
And you would do that one, I would assume.
Same thing. Depends on how many people are going to be in there. It's not I get a little of the heebie-jeebies when I'm surrounded by too many people. But it's going to be pretty. Going to take pictures.
Fair enough. I think you sent us this one, Jen. I had not heard about this story. This must have just happened today. Southwest Airlines Flight 3426 from Tampa to Raleigh, North Carolina, had a rapid depressurization, had to make an emergency landing. But what really scared a lot of people was that the pilot got on board the PA system and announced, "We're going down." That would probably scare the hell out of, even if the plane didn't depressurize.
Right, so I guess they had some alarm about the cabin pressure, And from what I heard on the radio, the captain, I think he said, we're going down to 10,000 feet. But everybody just heard we're going down as they were zooming down to try and fix the cabin pressure. And so, yeah, it freaked out a lot of people.
Maybe it's a phrasing issue. Maybe he should, like, the first 3 words should be something other than we're going down to 10,000 feet. You know, maybe it should be that we're going to decrease altitude or something. That could solve this problem.
Yeah, and then on the radio they were just saying, come on, the captain's probably trying to do 4 million things at once, and but yeah, everybody got scared and decided to blame the captain because why not, right? People just aren't as understanding anymore.
What I think actually happened is they were playing the first verse from "Love in an Elevator" by Aerosmith over the PA system.
Are you gonna sing that for us, Gary?
No, I'm not. But if you understand what I'm talking about, I think that my mission is accomplished.
All right, Gary.
Another kind of bizarre story. The Russian subway will now accept passengers doing 30 squats as payment for a ride.
What? Where'd you hear that? What's your source?
The LA Times.
What?
Is that a reputable newspaper, Jen? I don't know.
Yes, it just won best travel section in the country from SATW.
But yeah, so they created some sort of system where it will, take a video of you, and if you do 30 squats, the idea to get people in shape, it will give you free passage on the subway.
That's hilarious. That would make me want to go to Russia more than the Ferris wheel at Staten Island. Do you get to keep the video of your?
To say
yeah, I don't even know if I can do 30 squats, but that sounds like a fun. That sounds interesting to me. I would want a video of me attempting to do 30 squats just to try and get a free subway ride.
I can already see the prank version of this being installed in front of a Walmart in North Carolina as we speak.
Would you do this, Rolf?
I would do it, but I don't know if I'd want to do it every day. I don't know if I want to get my public transportation in trade. And sometimes you have a lot of stuff to carry before you get on, your subway. So I would do it for the experience of having done it, but I don't know if I want to do it habitually.
I think it will be a week before hackers figure out how to get around this. They'll put up a phone near the camera on the device that shows people doing squats, and they'll end up getting a free ticket. It's just a matter of time. This thing will be gamed, and I'm all for it. I think it'll be highly entertaining when that story comes out, and we can talk about it next week.
And this is the 21st century. I mean, that's sort of the Miley Cyrusification of the event. It doesn't matter if it's successful or if it's offensive. It doesn't matter. If people are talking about it, then your mission is accomplished. So I think the hack would only help.
Yes, and what if you're you can get the same passage for half as many twerk poses as you do squats.
That's what I want to see. I want to see a twerk meter at the front of the subway.
I love it.
One other story that was kind of interesting. Chris gave us this one. In Surrey, in the UK, there's a safari park, and they have recently imposed a dress code on their visitors to stop scaring the animals. And basically, you can't wear a leopard print outfit anymore to the safari park because the animals were confusing them with actual leopards. Which raises the question, who the hell is wearing leopard skin prints to a zoo?
Well, there's that junket from the strip club, I guess. I don't know.
This is a true story, and I have videos. I have photos to back this up. They're on my website. I did a backstage tour of the Vatican once, where we got to go around the gardens and everything. And one of the women on my tour was wearing tight, hot pants and a leopard skin jacket. I kid you not, with super high heels walking around the Vatican. It was like the least appropriate thing you could have brought to the Vatican. And I was like, I have to take a picture of this.
Was she straight out of The Sopranos?
Pretty much. She was from somewhere in Europe, I know not where, but I thought it was highly entertaining.
Well, I
It
will
was
not have to worry about that. I do not own any leopard print that I'm aware of.
So like heavy metal bands and people from certain parts of New Jersey should be cognizant of this.
yes. If you're winding up in Surrey in the UK, make sure to
The
maybe you can still
picture,
wear a fur, but
the picture on the news article, the link that we have, is interesting because it shows two tigers in the window, and one of them is coming towards the woman with the leopard print. I don't know if you're looking at that right now,
yeah,
Gary.
yeah, I am. But the tigers and leopards, I don't even think live in the same habitat.
I'll tell you this: we were at where were we? We were in we were in the zoo in Idaho, and I think it was a mountain lion exhibit. And Cora, we were walking this way, and Cora's so small that as we were walking, before the mountain lion was just, sitting there in its place, and as we were walking, it started running alongside us. And that also happened when we were at, there was like a safari type park in the Monterey area, and they said, don't let, the little ones get too close to the cages because the wild animals they still think they're prey. And even though they're in cages, they still charge a little bit on occasion. It's really interesting to see that happen.
Good thing you didn't go to an Australia one. Then you'd have to be saying the rest of your life, a dingo ate my baby.
Cora's learning about Australia this week, but Gary, I'm sorry I didn't get your picture to her. Our scanner isn't that big. Her picture's way bigger than our copier.
Wow. Oh, well. Well, it's not a whole lot of travel news this week. We got an interesting guest. So, Rolf, you're on the show. You wrote this book. I remember when I started traveling around the world. It was one of the books that everyone recommended, and it's the 10th anniversary of it now. So, are you coming out with a new edition of the book? Have there been any changes you made to the book? And what has changed since you wrote the book?
Well, the book is coming out this week as an audio book. And actually, my publisher is Tim Ferriss, who wrote The 4-Hour Work Week, and in fact, The 4-Hour Work Week was influenced in some ways by Vagabonding, and so he's starting his, one might say, Oprah-style book club that's sort of geared towards males, although, of course, there's a big travel audience among women, too. And so that's sort of the occasion. It is the 10th anniversary, but this week is the week that we're rolling out the audio book. And interestingly, not a lot in the book was changed. I update the resources online, and Jen, you remember when I was writing the book. I think you may have even sent me some ideas, and you put me in touch with Boots and all back in the day. It's funny to think that it's been 10 years.
Wait, Ralph, for our listeners,
yeah.
Tell them the title of the book, because some of them might not have seen it yet.
Oh, right. Vagabonding, An Uncommon Guide to the Art of Long-Term World Travel, which Random House published in 2003, and then the audiobook version of Vagabonding is coming out this week. I recorded it this summer, and the book is a core of philosophical advice. There's some practical advice which I keep updated online, but the philosophical core of the book hasn't changed much. So the things that I did change were things like I no longer recommend poste restante. Do you guys remember poste restante?
Yeah.
For picking up packages?
Yeah.
And I think that still exists, but there's just better options for that these days. And I think I took out reference to CD-ROMs and other, dinosaur era 2002 technologies. But for the most part, the book on audio is the same book that's on paper. And because it sort of has an advice, inspirational, existential slant to it, it sounds good on audiobook. So I'm pretty excited about it. And Tim Ferriss being Tim Ferriss, he's really done a great job of getting the word out and getting it to people who may not usually wander into the travel section of the bookstore. The kind of people who maybe need its message or have been thinking about travel and have yet to get the right little bit of inspiration. So it's been fun to see it take new form.
I listened to the intro. So Tim reads his intro to the book and talks about how, before all of his fame, that he went traveling, and that this and I think was it an Emerson book were the only two books that he carried, and he talks about the influence that you had on his trip, and it's really it's just really inspirational to hear him connected to you in that way through an actual experience.
Yeah, it's funny. He contacted me in 2005 or 2006 when he was working on the 4-Hour Workweek. And since my book came out, a lot of people have contacted me with sort of similar book ideas of their own. And so I talked to him and tried to help him and stuff, not expecting much. And then it turned into this million-selling bestseller, and Tim is sort of his own brand, and he's had 2 sequels to it. And so it's sort of funny that I knew him before he became a brand. And the little advertisement on his blog says, "Read the book that inspired the trip that inspired Tim's books," I think. So that was kind of cool. Yeah. So he's a good guy for getting the word out. And for any author, I think it's awesome when you find a whole new audience for your book. And so that's a fun thing to be experiencing 10 years after it first came out.
Well, in the book and the audio version, you define vagabonding in the beginning. Maybe you can define it for our listeners, and then talk about, do you still travel in that way, and if so, how much out of the year? And let's compare it to, is Gary living your definition of the vagabonding lifestyle?
Yeah, well, vagabonding I define as taking time off from your normal life to travel the world for an extended period of time, be that 6 weeks or 6 months or 2 years or 6 years, on your own terms. It's something that is not just a vacation or an escape from your real life, but sort of a redefinition of your life as you taking your life on the road. And the philosophical core of the book is about how time is your truest form of wealth, and that you should spend your time in a way that enhances your life. And if travel is something you've dreamt about, then it's certainly something that you should give to yourself, and that you shouldn't postpone the experience of travel. And yeah, definitely Gary has been living that lifestyle for a long time. I think there's many different ways to do it, but certainly from what I know of Gary, he's been living a very pure version of that.
Have you guys ever met in person?
No.
We got to make that
Actually,
happen.
I would say that my first 3.5 years that I was traveling was closer to what the book was talking about. And certainly the last 2 years, I've not really been traveling that way. It's become more, the website's gotten bigger, so it's become more professional and more business oriented. I mean, I still travel all the time, but it's not the same as what I used to be doing. And there's a good argument to be made. I need to go back to that, because what I'm doing now, I don't know if it's sustainable.
Yeah, well, I think there's a good argument for both ways. I had a very similar experience, that I wrote the book after 2.5 years of doing just high-octane vagabonding, and then add on another 2 years of living as an expat in Korea. And then since the book has come out, I have mixed it up in different ways. Like I got this property here in Kansas. I've been doing some university teaching. I teach a class in Paris every summer. And so I think it's really personal, If you're feeling the itch, and God knows I do all the time, to go back to that more pure, high-octane kind of vagabonding, then that's a good voice to listen to if you can make it happen. But at the same rate, you meet a lot of vagabonders who've been at it for 2, 3, 4 years and are feeling kind of weary about it, and it's good for them to switch gears too. So I sort of, in the book, I promote the idea of vagabonding as something that's fluid and really pegged to your own dreams and desires and inclinations. So.
Right, and you said at your, in your own style, right? So vagabonding doesn't necessarily have to be dirt cheap backpacking. It's about the time being out away from your comfort zone and your normal routine, right?
Exactly. And I have some arguments in the book against the one-downsmanship of super hardcore backpacking.
What's
the idea
that?
of always arguing for the cheapest price everywhere and staying in the cheapest hotel everywhere, which I see a lot on the backpacking circuit. And in a way, it's understandable because everybody's trying to maximize their money. But I like to support the idea of maximizing your experience, And sometimes bed bugs are not as lending to a good experience as a more comfortable place to sleep. And I think you travel in different ways at different times of your life. I started vagabonding almost 2 decades ago in North America, living in a van, driving around, and I don't travel that same way anymore. I was in Europe this summer, and I rented a car to drive around the countryside of France, which felt very bourgeois at the time because I'm from the old backpacker circuit. Interestingly, it was cheaper. It was cheaper to rent a car for 5 days than to take a train from Paris to Lyon and back. So it's strange. I felt guilty, and then I realized I didn't have to feel guilty because it was actually cheaper. Having my own little stick shift smart car was cheaper by the day than buying a train ticket. So
I don't know how you crammed yourself into one of those little smart cars. What happened to your legs?
Well,
were you pushing the pedals with your knees?
Let me just say that airplanes are good practice. If you're a tall person, then there's really no mercy unless you're in first class or an exit row. So, I just pretended I was on an airplane. Go ahead, Jen. Go ahead.
Well, I'm just thinking right now when we're thinking about the cheapest versus not the cheapest hostels and extending your money for more time on the trip. There's different vocabulary now than there was 10 years ago. Now you have boutique hostels. I don't think that word existed when I first met you, and when and that was even before the book and when you started the blog Vagabonding. There might have existed, maybe a few of them might have qualified, but the words I don't think were there.
Yeah, no, boutique hostels are great actually, and often they're not that much more expensive than the armpit ones that used to characterize travel. And in fact, since I've written the book, I talk a little bit in the book about how Europe can be more expensive, but there's hostels and you can go camping. But now with couch surfing and other ways that travelers are connecting, you can actually travel pretty cheap in Europe without being a dirtbag. You don't have to sleep in the ditch just to save money. So it's fun. It's been fun to see how, in some ways, it's become easier and more comfortable to travel in this open-ended vagabonding type way.
Do you do that? Do you stay with fans on the road, like that you haven't met? Do you stay with just to sort of have a place to stay?
Sometimes, not usually. Just because there's a big social obligation that comes with staying. I mean, there's a certain expectation. If somebody knows you by a reputation, then I don't know. I like to be a misanthrope and get out and wander around a little bit. And so I've had a lot of fun staying with friends of friends or people who've made generous offers. But I'm still kind of a fan of that that energy that comes with anonymously discovering a new place. But it's fun to have that option for sure.
Let me ask you an inside baseball question. You mentioned Tim Ferriss as the publisher, but then you mentioned before Random House was a publisher. So Tim Ferriss clearly wasn't your publisher when you started, so what's his role in this? What's he doing for you now with the relaunch of the new version?
Well, the Random House sort of just let the audio rights go, and so I just reacquired the audio rights, and then he basically was a producer for the book through his very organizing together system for running his own business. Basically, he just arranged some studios for recording, and really, an audiobook is, especially an Audible where you just download it, there's not a lot of overhead. So he just reserved some studio time. I read my book, which was fun. I performed my book. I sort of had to audition because he was thinking about getting an actor, and he says, well, why don't you try this yourself? And so I read it, and he liked it, and it was actually a lot of fun. And then he's just a guy who knows his audience. He knows this demographic who's interested in these sort of lifestyle fine-tuning experiments. And so I think it makes sense for him to be a publisher because he has, in a way that Random House can't. Random House is this big giant of publishing. He knows exactly this demographic that will be very receptive to the book in a way that Random House isn't. And so it's amazing how little effort was involved in turning these audiobook rights into a very fun version of the book in just a few months.
Rolf, not to take away from your book, which is, I just started listening to it, and it's very exciting, but Tim Ferriss mentioned another travel author in his intro, my hero, Tim Cahill. Is there any way that Tim is also going to be doing the audio versions of Tim Cahill's books? Please say yes. Please say yes.
Well, I can't say yes. I can mention that to Tim. We can have a Tim summit. But I think that would be wonderful. And Tim Cahill is one of those guys who was really influential on me, and I know on you, when we were getting started. And now it's like, sort of a new generation has come along. And
they don't even know him because he's not an online writer.
Because he's not an online writer.
I never knew who Tim Cahill was until you mentioned him, Jen. Never heard of him.
I know. And you've probably never read his books, Gary.
Oh, but I did take a van trip with him in Namibia a couple of weeks ago, and I mentioned that we do a podcast together, and he said hi. I forgot to mention that to you.
So when you mentioned my name, he did know who I was.
Yeah.
Of course.
How can anybody forget Jen Leo? Come on.
Thanks,
Jen who? Oh.
Yes, if I don't have a certain 500,000 number of social media followers, Gary's, he forgets about you.
Rolf, so after 10 years, this isn't a guidebook, so this isn't something that I would assume would expire. What's in it is kind of universal and timeless. Has this been, the stale's been steady over 10 years? Is this bringing in a consistent amount of money for you?
Yeah, they've been remarkably steady. It's sort of a grassroots book. It's sort of a cult book. It never really had a blockbuster presence. But it's been remarkably evergreen, if you know that publishing term. It gets passed around from person to person a lot, and it's remarkable how steady it's been. So yeah, it's been this nice guaranteed royalty year in and year out. And when the 4-Hour Workweek came out, in the 4-Hour Workweek had a very generous recommendation of Vagabonding, and that sort of bumped that to a new plateau. And so thanks to Tim endorsement 5 years ago and this week, it has really continued to get my book in front of new people, which is about as much as you can ask for, having put in the effort to do it.
I think it's also going to be interesting because it's opening up people to audiobooks. I'd heard of Audible before, and I've heard it, but I didn't really ever take the time. But already knowing your book and wanting to hear it again, and especially wanting to hear Tim's intro as well, it was easy for me to download it and get started listening to it.
Yeah, well, it lends, so much of the book is about sort of convincing people that they can travel and trying to inspire them. And so it lends itself well to an audiobook. I can see frustrated people listening to it in 30-minute chunks on the way to and from work. But I think you're right. It's my dad recently had eye surgery, and I was hanging out with him a bit while he was immobilized for a week, and he listened to a ton of audiobooks. I think like ebooks, a form like that's easily downloadable and even more importantly, easily multitaskable is going to become more and more popular, where people can listen to the book at the gym, and even if they don't like the book, then at least they've gotten a workout sort of thing. So I'm excited to be in this new format.
I have to ask you one more thing. Part of your marketing efforts for this is using BitTorrent. I know Tim Ferriss had a lot of success with that with his most recent book. How is that working out? And I assume this was Tim's idea?
It was, yeah. I think of BitTorrent and I think like
piracy.
Piracy, exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Doesn't that mean you listen to it for free? What am I missing here?
Well, the BitTorrent is a promo. Like, you can go to BitTorrent and see a few of my videos, and you can hear the first 2 chapters, and you can read a couple chapters of Marco Polo Didn't Go There as an ebook. It's just a teaser. Tim is much better to answer this question than me, because this was pretty new to me. But I suspect it's that people who are going there for free stuff might stumble into these teasers for the Vagabonding book and end up buying it themselves. But I can't really tell how it's done, in part because we just began this week, and it's really Tim's expertise. A lot of the online stuff that we've been doing this week. I did a Reddit Ask Me Anything this morning, and it was a lot of fun. I mean, just some great questions. But that's very new to me, and Tim is much more savvy in the way of these sort of up to the minute type. Finding an audience, getting the word out type venues.
All right. Any more questions before we
Yes,
move
yes,
on?
yes. More
Okay.
questions, more questions. I want to get back to talking about how travel has changed in these 10 years. Rolf, do you travel with gadgets now? Or because when I met you, I think I met you at the Bangkok Oriental on your first National Geographic Traveler piece, and you were doing sort of a vagabonding versus Lux piece,
Mm-hmm.
and you were taking so many notes with a journal and a pen. Do you still do you still record your thoughts in that manner, or have you switched to voice messaging or writing through an iPad, or do you travel with gadgets now?
I do travel with gadgets. I still take notes the old-fashioned way. Um, I mean, these days, the smartphone puts all these tools in the palm of your hand quite literally, and so I used to take pictures with a film camera to help me remember a place that I thought I might write about, and now I do the same thing, but I do it with my phone. It's actually extraordinarily convenient. Um, I haven't used a lot of audio notes, but interestingly, my old my old Olympus digital recorder broke a couple weeks ago. I've been interviewing my parents about their lives. They're both in their 70s. And so I used my iPhone, and it works better. Like
The
the
voice
audio
memo.
quality, yeah, from the voice memory actually has better audio than like a 2006 era Olympus digital recorder. And so I can see myself if I'm doing a heavily repertorial story where I'm interviewing people. I can see myself using my phone for those audio notes, which have great audio. So yeah, I was online. I had an author website a long time ago, but in the field, I've never really been technologically dependent that much. But it's slowly becoming more so that way. I go to a new American city now, and I use the GPS on my phone. Instapaper has completely transformed how I read. Do you guys use Instapaper?
No, tell me about that.
No, I have an RSS reader in my Kindle.
The Instapaper, basically you go to an article online, and I read a lot of long-form journalism. You just click your Instapaper icon, and it sends it to the Instapaper account, which you can read on your computer, but I read it on my phone. And so it allows you to get a bunch of, you can find a great 8,000-word story from Rolling Stone or Outside, and it just makes it one big long line of text. And so I can just read it with one hand while I'm on the subway or on a bus or wherever. And so instead of carrying all of these paper magazines with me, I just have my favorite stories that I've seen in this very clean and ad-free account. And so it's sort of like a Kindle, but it's for your sort of self-selecting magazine articles.
You know what? I remember that. I remember you doing with your stack of magazines at the Atlanta Hotel.
At the Atlanta
in
Hotel,
Bangkok,
yeah.
and I remember you had like The Economist, and I can't even remember, but you were just sitting there going through a stack of magazines about that big.
Well, speaking of Poste Restante, I had probably gotten a shipment from my sister. My sister had probably sent some New Yorkers and Harpers and stuff, and so you probably caught me while I was. But I love that kind of reading. I like books, but I'm also really big on articles, and so probably more than anything, when I go to my iPhone when I'm traveling, it's just something I use in place of a magazine. I'm using it to read my articles and stuff. And so I'm not using a lot of apps and stuff, but the way technology works, in a couple years maybe I will be. I'm a slow and stubborn adopter of that stuff, and I'm a little suspicious of technology, in part because I sort of have a monkey brain. Like if I'm too connected, then it'll pull me out of my environment, and then I'll get really sucked into my, whatever, my Facebook feed or my Instapaper story. And so almost as a matter of self-discipline, I try to keep those interactions to a minimum. But who knows? I travel a lot different. As technologically resistant as I am, I travel a lot differently now than I did 10 years ago, voluntarily.
Where have you been recently, and how long were you there? Sorry, Gary. Do you want to ask something else?
Oh, no, I was just saying I am the exact opposite. My background has always been as a tech guy, and when I began traveling in 2007, things have changed a lot, and I agree. I used to have a digital camera, an audio recorder, GPS, and all that stuff is gone, and it's just all been condensed into my iPhone now. And I found myself actually going in the opposite direction. I was, doing everything native digitally, and now I'm starting to get requests to do stuff for print.
That's awesome.
It's all sort of just blurring together.
Yeah.
But anyways, what Jen said, where have you been lately?
I've been in Kansas, and actually, you might see my my Kansas landscape pretty soon, because I'm in the garage, but I have like 10% battery power, so I might have to run back to my house and see if I can't plug back in. But while I still have 10%, I am in a garage in Saline County, Kansas, and I usually aim to get back to Kansas in the fall because it's a really beautiful time of year here, and my farm here is one of my favorite places in the world. But like I said, I was in Europe for much of the summer. I'm headed to Mexico later this year, and then I'm moving back to the East Coast. I'm doing some university teaching for spring semester, and so that's sort of another texture that has changed my travel life, is that I've done some more university teaching, and that's kept me rooted to one place. First Philly and now New Haven for a while.
And can anybody sign up for, like, I think your Paris classes are open. Are they? And you've taught some in Hawaii. And what classes do you have in 2014 that are open if our listeners wanted to take your travel literature classes?
Yeah, well, you can't take the university classes because you have to be an enrolled student. But the Paris American Academy definitely is open to all qualified takers, and is really an amazing experience. I've been doing it for 10 years now. And you visited me once or twice, I think, Jen.
Yep.
And I'm doing a talk at University of New Hampshire. At rolfpotts.com/events, there's usually an updated listing of what I'm doing. I'm doing a panel at the AWP conference, and it's this weird professionalized thing. I mean, I know that you guys do speaking at TBEX and places like that, and so I think if in the pure educational sense, if you want to get the Rolf Potts classroom experience, just go to Paris, because that has that's really developed into a special place and experience in the 10 years since you first saw me do it years ago.
And is it travel focused, or is it nonfiction writing?
It is. There's travel in it, but we have 2 fiction teachers, and then I have another nonfiction teacher working with me, and so it's general long-form nonfiction and poetry and fiction. It's just an all-around creative writing workshop. Which is good. I mean, Paris is a town that lends itself as well to poetry and fiction as it does to travel. So it's been good. We have some really good teachers out there.
All right. Well, let's move on to the next segment of the show, because Ralph's losing his battery and we're limited on time. So let's move on to our picks of the week. Jen, you got a deal for us this week? We'll let Ralph move while we're doing this.
I hope you don't lose me. If you do, you know that I'm just sitting in my home wondering what happened to you guys.
I do have a deal this week, Gary. On Genleo Deals, the Ritz-Carlton in Lake Tahoe, which is an amazing hotel right at mid-mountain of the North Star Ski Resort. Normally the rooms are incredibly expensive, well above $500, $700 a night when it's in the middle of the ski season. For the first snow tracks, the first few dates in December, they are offering rooms for as low as $299 midweek and $399 on the weekend, which includes 2 ski tickets at North Star as well. So if you are a skier, or you are a Ritz-Carlton fan, or you just want to explore North Lake Tahoe, check it out, and that deal is right on genleodeals.com.
That's a sale?
$299 is a sale. It's the base rooms outside of this deal can easily go for $500 or $600 a night. But don't forget, you're getting the lift tickets. So it's $299, which includes 2 lift tickets. I think those are around $80 a piece each.
Well, my pick, there are Fabergé eggs now that you can get for only 10 grand. No, seriously. So I am trying to move all the electronics in my life to USB, because USB ports are now found on airplanes or found in hotel rooms. It's universal. You don't have to worry about adapters or anything. But one problem I always had was charging AA batteries, rechargeable batteries that I use for my flash and my camera and a couple other things. I have a cordless mouse, and I was at a store here in Appleton, Wisconsin, and was walking down the aisle and saw this, and it's a Rayovac USB battery charger for lithium-ion batteries.
Wow.
And it's far smaller than what I had before, fits in the USB port if anything, and you just let it run overnight and you got your batteries charged. And this is so much better than what I had, and I'm really happy to have found something like this and know that there's a solution, and this is going with me on my next trip. So, Rayovac USB battery charger.
How much, Gary?
Oh, it was like $5. I mean, it really wasn't much to it at all. I mean, it was dirt cheap. I'd have to check, but it was certainly under 10. May have been like 7 or something. But it's not expensive at all, and I literally found it hanging on a shelf in a grocery store. So,
great tip, excellent stocking stuffer.
Rolf, you got any recommendations, picks, or tips for people?
How about a destination, Rolf?
A destination. Well, the Loire Valley of France, which is, not even on some people's top 10 list. I hung out in this summer, and it was just wonderful. It's just this sleepy agricultural river valley in central France, and it's just a great place to wander around. So that would be my bourgeois travel recommendation after having rented a car and driven around. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Give us a non-bourgeois one, or a different kind of tip.
Documentary films.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Okay. There's a film that just premiered called Gringo Trails, which sort of examines the effect of global travel, and especially backpacker travel on destinations over the course of the last 20 years. I'm a talking head in this documentary. It's made by a friend of mine. But it's a really terrific film, and I think anyone who's vested in the world of independent travel will find it really interesting. It's called Gringo Trails. And it's also the 25th anniversary of a movie called Cannibal Tours, which follows a group of awkward Western tourists as they go to the Sepik River Valley in Papua New Guinea in 1987. And it has a level of dirt on par with The Office, or Curb Your Enthusiasm, as you watch these tourists really embarrass the viewer. But it's a really brilliant form of documentary filmmaking because it makes you question the tourists, but then it makes you question why it's very documentary. Both of these are smart documentaries. One Cannibal Tours, and one Gringo Trails.
All right.
Is Gringo Trails going to be coming out to the mainstream theaters, or do we have to find it somewhere independent or smaller or online?
For the next few months, you probably have to be in a town where it's showing at a film festival, like Toronto or someplace like that. But I imagine it'll be on Netflix too long. And I think it's gringotrails.com. If you just Google Gringo Trails, the filmmaker is named Peggy Vale. And she's been using footage from her own from years and years ago, and it's a really smart documentary, and really like some footage from Koh Phangan in Thailand that is just really telling about how these destinations have changed over the years.
All right then, let's start to wrap things up. Jen, where can people find you online?
You can find me on Twitter at @JenLeo and on the LATimes.com travel website for my WebBuzz column, and also on the new website, JenLeoDeals.com.
Which is going to be mentioned somewhere other than this podcast when?
As soon as I get a few more stories up, Gary.
You gotta just do it. Just do it. You can't wait. You just gotta pull the trigger.
Yes,
Rolf,
sir.
Where can people find you online?
I'm at rolfpotts.com. Twitter is at Rolf Potts. Vagabonding.net is my the promotional book website for the book. Yeah, and actually, Jen, as you were talking, I was thinking you should publish Tim Cahill.
You're right. I should.
If you have no deals, you can have Jen Lee.
I should totally bring
There's an
Tim.
idea.
I should just do Tim Cahill's website for him. Is what I should do. Anyway, we'll talk about that. We'll
it
talk
might be
about that
something
later.
to convince him to do that.
Yeah, if he didn't have
Yeah.
to lift a finger.
You could start by getting him on the podcast. He said he had never listened to a podcast in his life when I talked to him.
I
So,
tried to get him on once, and he said he's not really good in radio because he's very
well,
long-winded.
we're doing video now, so hey, problem solved.
Rolf,
As
really
you-
great to see you. Congratulations on your big anniversary, and don't forget, listeners, go check out Rolf's new book at audible.com.
And until next time, go to
Thanks, guys.
rolfpotts.com, download the audio version of vagabonding.com, and see you next week.